A long time ago, we had our own data centers with bare metal servers. Over time, we progressed towards virtual machines, we got services, we got APIs, we got control planes. And all that moved into clouds. And I'm intentionally saying clouds as in plural, but I'll get to that later. What matters within this context is that we are now moving a step forward and going above clouds, raising above clouds. But to explain why I'm saying all that, I need to go back in history and give you a quick rundown of how we started, where we are, and then discuss where we're going. Back in the days, whenever somebody, developer or somebody else, needed a server, that person would request it from ops or sysadmin, and that somebody would request a physical machine, and then we would wait and wait and wait, and the machine would arrive, and then we would still have to wait because somebody, that ops guy or sysadmin person, would need to install the operating system, configure it, set it up, do whatever needs to be done. And if you need more, the process repeats. Request, 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 wait until it arrives, set it up, repeat over and over again. The infrastructure was static, meaning you get a server, it's your server. If you need more, if you need less, well, tough luck. Patience was the most important ability everyone had to have, because if you're not patient, well, you're going to suffer greatly. We had no services, no APIs, no control planes. We were operating mostly with SSH. You SSH into a machine, you do what needs to be done, and then SSH into another machine, do whatever else needs to be done. And that's how it was. Now, to be frank, most of companies had a limited number of servers at that time. We were not counting in dozens or hundreds or thousands. And then we got virtual machines. Virtual machines changed or had a potential to change the game drastically. We could create servers or virtual machines, in that case on a Vim. Whenever you need a server, you get the virtual machine, it takes a minute or two to create it, or it could have taken a minute or two, but at that time everything was mostly mutable. We could create virtual machines relatively easily, or ops people or sysadmins could do that, but still somebody had to install things, somebody needed to configure things, we had to worry about the capacity and quite a few other things. But to be honest, ops were very happy with virtual machines once they got used to it, but developers not that much, because they still had to wait a lot. Maybe not as much as with bare metal servers, but waiting or patience was still an important aspect of our daily lives. The real change came with cloud. We got APIs. So whenever we need something, all we had to do is send a request to an API, and then API would figure out what to do, but that's really not the case. That's how it looked to us. What the API did was pass the message, pass the request to control plane or control planes, and then they would do something, whatever that something is. And what that something is depended on the request. At that time, we were mostly limited to virtual machines and disk drives or external storage, but that was still a huge change. And the role of control planes was to figure out what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and so on and so forth. We as users would send a request to API saying, hey, I need a virtual machine, and that API would forward the request to control plane, and control plane would figure out, hey, what is the server where I could create a virtual machine? Where is the best place to have it? Is it still up and running? Should I update it? Should I create it? Should I delete it? What should I do with that something? How should I fulfill that request? The control planes were essential over there, even though they're not visible, because they orchestrate everything. So if you do not need a virtual machine, a server anymore, we could send a request to API forwards it to control plane figures out whether it should delete it, remove it, shut it down, put it on hold, what it should do with that VM if you do not need it anymore, so that somebody else can come and request a new machine, a new server, new VM, and it uses that space that is not occupied anymore by us because somebody else said, I do not need it anymore. So control planes were effectively managing the capacity of a huge data center in, let's say, AWS. They were figuring out what to do, and they were crucial, and they're still crucial, but not necessarily in the same way as before. But from user perspective, we got better services, better APIs, better control planes. Everything was, compared to what it was before, frictionless. We just ask for something and we get it. Now, could we do it at that time ourselves in our own data centers? Well, maybe we could, maybe we couldn't. But the real question was it worth it to do it ourselves? And many companies back then realized, and some are still realizing, that it's not worth it. We are moving our workloads to cloud because that's a more effective way to manage everything, because, hey, AWS, Google, Azure, whomever knows how to do it, and we just consume it as a service. Now, remember that at that time we were limited to servers, mostly to servers and storage. Today, cloud is very different than it was back then. We have services for almost everything. If you need a virtual machine, there is a service for that. If you need a database, there is a service for that. If you need a Git repository, again, there is a service for that. If you need storage, we get it. If you need machine learning, again, we can get it. All those things are managed as services, at least from end user's perspective. All we have to do is send a request to the API. API goes to a control plane, the invisible thing running in AWS and Azure and Alibaba and Google Cloud. And that control plane makes sure that the services that we need are running, that they are managed, that they are doing whatever they need to be doing. Control planes are crucial in this story, even though they're invisible. And we were still pondering the same question as before. And the question is, can I do that myself? Well, you can, maybe. But now the gap between what cloud services offer and what you could do yourself is even bigger. Because now we have services for almost everything. Cloud is not only about virtual machines anymore. It is about almost everything. Whatever you need for your applications to run successfully and your workloads and whatever you have, there is a solution available in cloud. As a result of that increase in the number of services, there is also increase in the number of providers. We have AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, Alibaba, Linode, DigitalOcean, and all those services are begging for us to become their customers. And they're all offering us not only compute, not only VMs, but all sorts of services. What I mentioned before, if you need a database, if you need machine learning, and so on and so forth, it's available. As a result, everybody is multi-cloud. Everybody is using more than one cloud service. Now, at this moment, you might be saying, hey, I'm not that person. I'm using only AWS, or I'm using only Google Cloud, or only Azure, or only DigitalOcean. And that might be the case, but those are not all the cloud services. There's much more than those that are traditionally associated with cloud. There is also GitHub, Elastic, Snyk, HashiCorp, Grafana, Datadog, and so on and so forth. And if you count all those as cloud services, which they are, then almost everybody is multi-cloud. You might be using AWS and GitHub and Elastic, or Google Cloud and DigitalOcean and Snyk, and so on and so forth. You must be using at least 2 cloud services, probably many more, even though you might not be aware of that. And that means that you are multi-cloud. You are running your workloads, you're using services from more than one cloud vendor. And all clouds work in the same way. There is always an API. That's how we communicate with cloud services. That's how we request something. That's how we express our desired state, and so on and so forth. And every API in almost every cloud provider has a control plane behind that API. And control plane is making sure that something is created, that something is updated, that something is upgraded, that something is removed, and so on and so forth. It is doing heavy lifting for us. All we have to do is say, hey, this is what my desire is, this is what the state that I want to have is, and control plane is figuring out what types of actions to do to make that happen and how to ensure that the state is always maintained. So we're all multi-clouds, and all those clouds have APIs, behind those APIs, control planes that are managing the resources that we need. And they all follow the same pattern. And we, as multi-cloud users, need to figure out how are we going to manage all that. How are we going to interact with some API through UI or CLI, and some other API again through UI or CLI or direct API calls, and so on and so forth. Now we have a problem of managing our workloads and our states or desired states across multiple clouds with different APIs, different UIs, different CLIs. So the problem is fragmentations. There are too many UI, CLIs, APIs. It is getting harder and harder to manage. It is getting complicated to coordinate all those services in different clouds, hard to observe. And here comes the important part. Almost all vendors are still giving us building blocks because they need to appeal to a very wide audience. So they cannot give us very opinionated solutions because those solutions would fit only a fraction of the users of the audience. So they're all giving us building blocks that we need to assemble somehow into something meaningful across different services, different clouds with different UIs, CLIs, APIs, and so on and so forth. It's complicated. Multi-cloud is not going to go away because each of the vendors are providing specific services that are somewhere better, somewhere worse than others. So we're bound to pick and choose. Hey, this is where I should run my machine learning workloads. This is where I should run my applications. This is where I should have a database, and so on and so forth. Multi-cloud is here to stay. And then we need to figure out how we manage all that complexity of using different UIs and different CLIs and different APIs and so on and so forth. And the answer is relatively simple and straightforward, at least logically speaking. And that's that we need to move ourselves above cloud. We, industry as a whole, need to create a universal API and a universal control plane. For our users, for ourselves, we need to have a single API to manage everything, and we need to have a single control plane that will manage all those things spread across different clouds. We're still in early days of the move towards universal API, universal control plane, assembling all those pieces into something meaningful, and so on and so forth. And the solution that is currently in front of everybody is Crossplane. Crossplane gives us universal API, universal control plane, and if you put Upbound solution on top of that, Upbound cloud, then we get all the enterprise features that we might need. So we need to lift ourselves above the cloud, adopt universal API, universal control plane. And if you do choose Crossplane, and you should, we get additional benefits. We get tailor-made services, tailor-made platforms. We can shift left. We can create platforms, internal developer platforms, tailor-made for the needs of a company where we work in, and provide a unified experience to all the users. One API, one control plane to manage all the APIs and all the control planes that we do use. Now, unlike in other videos today, I will not show any demo. I will not show you how to do all that because I already have videos on that subject. And if you're interested, the links are in the description. So go and check it out. Check Crossplane itself. See how it integrates with GitOps. See how you can create compositions to shift left. And see how you can put all your clouds, all your services that you're consuming under a single API, single control plane. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.